A pleasure to meet all at last. And here we are, once again, with HJN Season 5. So, even though I have talked a lot about certain things that might appear randomly in this whole series worth of topics, I gotta say, I will have had a lot to speak of. In this final season that I plan on doing for HJN, we're gonna see how much more that I can put together. Stowaways is what we have in mind for number 2682. So let's just see how we can get this up and running. So the best way to describe stowaways goes something like this. They refer to unwanted individuals, guests or otherwise, that would appear on a certain ship or vessel. And while stowaways technically can be carried over to anything beyond the age of sail, as it was common sometimes for uninvited guests to show up aboard ships and other such water vehicles of the time, a lot of times when they did show up and were caught by the crews aboard these ships, they would be taken into custody and often jailed, usually inside of a brig, until they can be properly escorted to a prison. Of course, while this has carried over many times over, even to this very day, aboard various ships and whatnot, the idea of having security made as a means to prevent stowaways and unwanted free riders, as that was also a common thing going on. A lot of the times that stowaways on ships would appear was not only because of the fact that they had ways to escape from jail or otherwise, but also sometimes because at the times in which that passenger ships would show up around the world, some people couldn't really afford tickets, and sometimes more so, they would end up boarding the ship without paying, or even without getting caught. So, of course, a similar process can be explained through that sort of method, where it's not just aboard freight ships, but passenger ships as well. And we know that the process of stowaways or free riders or whatnot, anybody whom tries to get aboard a certain public transportation for free without having to pay up, it's still a problem that might happen today. Of course, as we know by now, with trains, for instance, there's always a chance that somebody might try to board a train without getting a hold of a ticket. Or with freight trains, sometimes they can be rather easy to board up into. You could probably climb into an empty hopper or gondola without being detected. And sometimes they might also have box cars that would be wide open as well, typically in a shipping yard, when goods are supposed to be loaded and whatnot. But as you probably know by now, there's always a good amount of risk that comes with free riding aboard freight trains. There's always a good chance that it can get hotter than an oven inside the cars, especially the box cars and reefer cars, because man, those things can be roasting on the inside. There's always the time as well when winter shows up, a similar thing can happen. But regardless of how it all goes down and what method of transportation is there when these unwanted people are on board, it's certainly one thing worth talking about. Probably one of the worst cases of stowaways, though, that results in the massive risk of death aboard would have to be with the airplane. You might have heard those stories in which that some people might try to hitch a ride aboard for free by going into the undercarriage or even the wheel wells. You know, when a plane takes off at high speeds, the wheels will fold automatically into their own receiver bay, in which that the planes are now wheelless. It helps to reduce drag and allow for better aerodynamics while in the air. Of course, some of the biggest risks associated with stowaways aboard planes in this exact manner is that if they're inside the wheel wells, there's always a good chance that any of the following can happen. They could get crushed by the massive wheels because of how dark it is on the inside as well. There's also the danger of freezing up above, because there's also no insulation in these areas. Same with the cargo compartments. Similar things can be noted as well. Not much lighting and not much insulation up there, which does bring up the risk of either dying from getting crushed by something or from freezing. But probably the third and most dangerous component of flying on board planes in this exact manner, of being in the wheel wells or whatnot, are the bends. The bends are a process in which that low pressure can allow for nitrogen bubbles to fill up in your bloodstream. And as you probably know by now, decompression sickness, as explained by scuba divers and many other people who have gone on to great lengths to experience very low pressure and then very high pressure in a short amount of time, does result in a massive amount of pain. The bubbles will burst inside the system, and consequently, it can be fatal depending on what happens. So the bottom line is that when you're on safe ground, typically the pressure is normal, but the pressure is incredibly low up in the atmosphere. And with higher pressure down below in the ocean, typically causing the bends to unfold, this does run the risk of the bends becoming a deadly factor in riding for free inside an airplane. So, bottom line is that there's always a great deal of risk that comes around, regardless of what transport you have. With planes, it's probably the worst series of case scenarios in which that anyone could die via the many reasons that I had explained about why free riding aboard planes or stowaways on planes is always a bad move to make. But any transportation, it may be bus, ship, train, even someone's Uber. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that trying to free ride in an Uber also carries some risk. Getting locked in the trunk and not having a way out or anything of the sorts. People might think you're a kidnapping victim, which is not out of the question, but it doesn't necessarily happen, at least from what we already know about. But I'm sure somebody could try to hitch a ride on an Uber in that fashion. Then again, it's probably not a good thing, even for me, to start giving out ideas to the public like that. Somebody could even be doing it right now, and I'm inadvertently the one responsible for causing it. Well, I'll just stop right now before it goes any deeper than that. Anyways, though, I've had a lot to say about stowaways and free riding and many other unique synonymous terms that correlate to people not paying for a fee for a ticket aboard certain public transportation. And so, tomorrow I will have more to talk about, HJN-wise, but make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.